Today we begin this great season of the church which we call Lent. I just called the season of Lent to be great. And it's a great season, don't get me wrong. But my experience of Lent is usually not a season that I would use to equate to being great. Probably the best word that I would use to describe the word Lent would be the word discipline. Probably next to the word attitude. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of the idea of discipline. I mean, true discipline takes work. And the idea of attitude demands a level of commitment. Well, I'm not the biggest fan of the idea of discipline. I'm also aware that discipline is necessary. For it's when we discipline ourselves that we grow. It's when we discipline ourselves that our lives get changed. It's when we actually discipline. It's actually when we have the right attitude that we grow. And I'd like to highlight the word actually. I mean, let's face it. As we approach the season of Lent, we have two ways of disciplining ourselves. We can discipline ourselves for the sake of jumping through a hoop, doing what is required of us, doing it as a way of just to go through the motions. Or we can actually choose to discipline ourselves with the hope of change, a change in improving our own lives. When I played football in high school, playing the games was the fun part. And the not so much fun part was the training that went with it. Lifting weights, the summer training camps and two-a-day practices, to even practices between the games. All this training was necessary to have success in the game. And not only was it important, but it was important that we actually did the training with the hope of improving our skill. With each time we did a rep, each time we went out to practice. And we're not just doing it for the sake to get by. The coaches would often remind us that it was important just to not go through the motions, but to get better each day. A matter of fact, if we would slack off and just go through the motions, it was a pretty easy way to make the coach mad. And then he would get after us. And so today we begin Lent, the season of discipline, the season of potential growth. And we begin this season today by having dust smeared on our foreheads. A smear that hopefully looks like a cross. And as the dust is smeared, we hear those words. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. We are being reminded of our own mortality, being reminded that we are going to die. Or perhaps we could otherwise translate these words into saying, you are going to die and you will be decomposed. You know, to have this reminder of death may seem strange. It may even leave us feeling a little bit uncomfortable. We live in a culture that fears death. But Lent, they say, is about dying to ourselves. Lent, they say, is about having an encounter with death so we can have new life when we celebrate the resurrection. It's about committing ourselves to the discipline of the season. Lent has 3 popular verbs: fasting, almsgiving, and prayer. 3 verbs that have great power to change our lives in our world. 3 verbs that can also be used as a way of jumping through a hoop to this season. As Jesus calls out the hypocrites, he's warning them against jumping through a hoop. If I'm honest with myself, in the past I've used these 3 verbs for Lent as a way of just jumping through a hoop. And when I've done that those years, my life did not change so much. I've also had experiences of Lent where I did make that conscious effort of fasting, prayer, and almsgiving. And my life was changed. These 3 verbs have the power to change us. It's all in a matter on how we commit ourselves to these verbs. How are we going to commit ourselves? Are we going to commit ourselves that this is just a hoop that we need to jump through? Or are we going to go through the season with the hope of changing our lives? How are you going to journey through this season of Lent?